Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Event Collab podcast. I'm super excited to have Omar Colom. I'm gonna let him say his name because he said it so much cooler than I can say it. I just read it like a regular. There it is.
Yeah,
I say it like just an American, like.
Just gotta roll the R a little bit,
I love that, man. First of all, man, I appreciate you coming on this podcast. We met on LinkedIn, if I'm not mistaken, right? Talking some education, tech industry, event industry stuff. And honestly, I'm just so glad that we even got to get to do this conversation. So real quick, for all those who don't know who you are, can you just tell them a little bit about yourself and where you currently are in your space?
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Omar Colom. I'm the founder of AV Educate, and I'm also the National Director of Education for BeeHiiv Technologies, which puts me kind of in a cool spot in the East market right here that I kind of get to control or have access to the chain, right? So essentially what AV Educate does is we train stagehand to become technicians. So general AV knowledge, all up to a breakout room. And then under the Evolve umbrella, we train technicians to be engineers or advanced engineers to get manufacturer certification. So I'm in a really cool spot where I get to see people go from rock bottom to the top of their career, or I get to meet really high-end guys who I've always admired or been in the industry for, and I get to work with them directly. Another cool factor is I get to work with the manufacturers directly and kind of recreate curriculums and stuff. And because I've been doing this for such a long time and I'm so passionate about it, I changed the game a little bit. It's not just a talking head or a GUI system you're looking at with somebody. I try to make it more interactive, more socialized. What Chris, kind of what you taught me during the pandemic, right? All that stuff about making it more personal, making it more about the audience, talking and communicating with them, being with them, not just here's a bullet point of a bunch of things, learn this, memorize it, take a test, like make it more personable so that each one gets the training they need. And being able to see that from the bottom to the top is very good and humbling sometimes because I get to adjust to the expectations, right? And especially when you have these classes when you have the guy who is putting in the money to advance, right? And he's like, hey, I don't know enough. Cool. Go to AV Educate to learn some of this stuff or learn this stuff here. I'll get you what I can get you here, but you're going to need to learn more. And then to the advanced guy, it's like, hey, I want to dive into the nitty gritty. I know all the basics already. I want to really dive into what we're doing here. And that's where it gets really fun for me because then I get to really troubleshoot and figure things out that questions that I don't even get to ask, right? And then vice versa, I'm constantly getting taught too because people are asking me questions that I wouldn't even think about. Signal flow, EDID, HTTP, things that I just, I either comes natural or I'm so used to the repetition of it. I forget to think about it or I forget the answer. It's like, oh, well, that's why we do it this way. Oh, you know what? That's a good one. I don't know. Let's figure this out together because we have some time, right? And it's a very cool place to be in right now. So that's kind of where I am in the industry right now, and I'm glad to be here.
Man, that's so cool. But so before we dive deeper into that, right, one of the things I always like to understand, I'm a huge origin story person because I literally, everybody I meet, I ask them, like, how did you get into it? And it's always funny to me because nobody I've met yet to this day has purposefully jumped into this industry. It's always like something or somebody they knew, or it's always a weird story. So Chris, how did you get started?
I'm going to blow your mind. I'm the first guy you met who wanted to do this my whole life. So I am second generation AV. My father owns a company in South Florida called Media Stage. Nice. So he's been doing AV for a long time. He's also a video engineer. My brother's also an engineer in Puerto Rico for the union. My uncle's a lighting engineer. So my family does this. So I wanted to do this growing up. I got into industry doing it. I have a great mentor. Obviously, my father taught me a lot. And, Mark Duffy taught me a lot. Michael Lurs taught me a lot. These guys kind of helped me the first 6 years of my career really get up there and become the man I am today when it comes to video. So I'm second generation. So I knew I wanted to do this. I knew about this industry. I actually knew about the industry. And that's how I got in. But that question is 100% true. A lot of people don't know. And part of my education and outreach is to help change that. Myself, you, Clem Harrod, like we're trying to create more of an awareness of our industry because it is so powerful and it is that scenario. Right? A lot of us stumble into this, or we do broadcasts or we do theater, and then we find out through somebody, hey, there's also this. Right. And you're like, oh, wait a minute, I didn't know this existed. Hold on, let me try some of that stuff. And then read some of this. But for me, I'm literally 90% of my business is corporate AV. About 5% is installations, and the other 5% is theater. Because obviously I started off doing that in high school and college. But corporate's been my main bread and butter my whole career because of my father who owns Media Stage. So I am second generation. I knew about it. I wanted to be in it. I got in it. I'm the youngest of the family. So my uncles was doing it. My brothers were doing it. And I was like, yeah, I want to be in this.
That's so crazy. That's so crazy. I was like, I have to know, like, what even kept you interested? Like, if everybody's doing it, like, what keeps you interested in it? Because honestly, I've tried to give this to my kids. Like, my kids are finishing high school, and I'm like, even my son, I'm like, he doesn't really want to go to college. I'm like, hey, look, you can kind of do this. Like, there's a tech savvy thing that you can do, and then you can learn other stuff as you go. And he's not biting it. He's not biting for it. So like, what kept you interested in the field?
So for me, and this has changed now a lot, right? So I've been doing this officially 12 years, my whole life, but officially 12 years in the industry. When I started, this video was the hardest thing to learn. There was no information out there. There was nothing. Even Infocom, who everybody's like, oh, that's where you go to start off. Infocom or Vixia was very installation specific, right? So a lot of IP stuff, a lot of audio, a lot of lighting, which I had no interest in. And then video was just kind of the basic, right? Like, here's the math for your projectors, and that's it, right? Like, that was it. It was math for projectors, and here's some basics. But like, you can't learn projectors with just reading anything. Although I will say, if you ever read a digital projection booklet, they have a lot of good information in there. Barco has a lot of good stuff too. But digital projection has a really good manual they put together for projectors. Highly recommend that if you guys are into reading. And then again, the youngest of them all, right, coming in the industry, I had to earn my right because my family's Spanish, and my father was like, I'm not giving you nothing. You got to earn your way. Which at the time I was like, this is bull. Like, I'm your son. Now, fast forward 12 years, like, it was the best thing ever happening, because as an EIC and working for him, and I'll say this even, I'll go back a little bit. When I was in the shop, I was almost 4 years doing shop work before I was able to do a show. And the reason was I had to learn, and this is my father, like, the egomaniac he is, right? And my mother as well. It was like, hey, in order to be a video guy, you need to learn everything about video. You need to learn how to QC it. You need to learn how to pull it, how to prepare it, how to do it on a pull sheet. You need to learn how to set it up and run it. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, this must be what it means to be, in the industry. So I learned all this stuff. And then like year 4 or 5, I wanted to become the lead of the video department. And the lead at that time wanted to move into a project manager role. So the company's like, hey, we'll give you a raise and give you this, but you have to go back to college and get a degree in this industry. So I went back for a second time and got a degree in digital film production. Then I became the lead for the video department. But then when I came to lead, I started to talk to freelancers more, because now I'm in a position of authority, sort of. And it was like, wait a minute, you only know projectors, or you only know cameras, and you only know switchers? What do you mean? Like, you're making way more money than I am, and you're just doing one job. And I set it up for you already. Like, you came in and just running, pushing buttons. So I was getting like a little like, what's going on here? So I spoke to my father, like, hey, I know a lot of stuff now. I kind of want to, spread my wings a little bit here. And he's like, here's some contacts for labor. Start over. Don't use the name we had. And he let me loose. And I started with Showmasters back in the day. And I kind of, built my way back up. But it was one of those scenarios where the curiosity of learning and the biggest hurdle was that there were so many people. There's so many ways to do stuff in our industry, right? And everybody has their own method of doing it. And when you're like the guy that wants to constantly be curious and learn things, you learn all kinds of contradictory information. And it took me years after this and again, a good friend of mine, Clem, I did a class about Proctorum. And it was like talking to him and him answering questions that I have about, well, that's not wrong if you're doing this, or this isn't wrong if you're doing this, and kind of just putting together like, hey, none of the things you learned is wrong. There's just what works for you and how you want to do it. But to backtrack there, the reason that for me that this was such a frustration was that I'm prior military as well. So right out of high school, I joined the military, and it was very SOP, very structured. Like, here's what you got to do. Like, if the military made a book about mopping, if the military made anything about mopping, there'd be a booklet of it, right? Like the bristles for the mop, the floor you're using on, the soap you use, the ratio. Like, there'd be a book on it. That's how the military was. So I was expecting to have like a booklet given to me, and there was never that. So I learned all these different ways to do things for different scenarios, and it took me till I met someone who was doing this, a lot, saying, none of those are wrong. They just fit the scenario that you were in. So you got to find out what works for you. And that's when I kind of said, you know what? Okay, cool. So I ended up having all these troubleshooting abilities and all these different ways of doing things. And then I've always been passionate about education. So I was every year taking a class, and it was like, oh, okay, like I'll take a fundamentals class on this. Well, I knew most of this stuff, but I learned this one thing, right? Like I took a class at Evolve back in the day with Eli or Murdoch, right? Man, I knew all this stuff, but they told me this one thing that was the game changer that I needed, right? So that one thing that clicks. So that was the kind of joy for me. It was like the troubleshooting, the figuring out, the what's next. How do I do this? How do I solve? How to make this work? Like that funness of it, right? That's what I thought was the fun part. Like I love doing the shows and pushing the buttons. That's great, but setting it up, which I know no one's like, I don't want to pull the truck and set up, but that to me is the interesting part, right? Like the signal flow, how to get it to where it has to go. Why isn't it working there? Like there's a bunch of things that we try to figure out in our brains, and we take educated guesses the best we can. And I think in our industry particularly, we're very good at that. But on the flip side to that, to me, that's the fun part, right? That's the part where you're the media server operator, the switcher guy, and you're trying to figure out all these routes and where that's going. It's like, that to me is fun. And that's what kept me going and what kept me interested and what makes me still to this day, like, really enjoy what we do here, because it's always a new challenge, always a new expectation. The clients are never without challenges. Let's go there, right? There's never like, oh yeah,
right.
And you're like, oh, cookie cutter show. Yeah, never happens. But that challenge is what keeps me interested and keeps me going and keeps me like, man, what's the next thing? How can I solve? And then when you get those challenges, you see them on paper and you make it happen, and you're just like, oh yeah, I figured this out. This guy figured it out. Woo! Like if you've ever gone to Ultra, for example, right? That's a big show. A bunch of stuff goes on in there. If you're the guy that figures that stuff out and it goes all together right the first time, you're like, I figured that out.
I did that.
Yeah, I did that. I made that happen. I post my pictures, and you see it now, right? You see it now on social media a lot now. Post pandemic, you see a lot of guys posting about their work and what they're doing. They're taking pride in this stuff, and that's what I think we lost for a little bit, right? And we gained back is that we were curious again. We wanted to figure out things. We wanted to do with the industry. We wanted to solve problems. We wanted to get back into this kind of like, I don't want to say chaos, but this controlled. We're like, I can solve this for my client because I know what to do.
Yeah, that's so good, man. And the learning piece, man, that was something that interested me, because I was looking at and I was like, 24 certifications. And so I feel underqualified talking to you. I just want to go on record of that.
No.
I have 0 qualifications. I didn't go to school. I'm that guy. I stumbled across this. Like, I was DJing and just was mixing at church and then got a shot. And I joke because I was like, one of the things, we were talking about when we were talking about education, right, was I've never been a stagehand. And so, like, I was like, I don't get it. Like, how do you even become? I don't even know how you really get into the industry. And
man, but that brings back to your point, right? How did you get in? Everybody's got their own way in. And so something you just said that's actually interesting. That it's been on my mind for a while now, and I'm talking to Kevin Ring and Tim Kay about this right now. Is the to your point about the education part, right? Mentorship versus certifications, right? What is the real difference in that? And I don't believe there is one way or wrong way. I think at every level there's a different benefit to each. And I think for you, like, obviously you came in and you worked it, right? You worked the ranks, you networked, you got yourself in with other people, you stayed in contact. You did in my opinion, and I could be wrong, correct me. You did the business side, right? You networked, you connected, you stayed in contact, you ran things, right? And that's what worked for you, and you moved up that way, and you got up the ladder, and you're doing very well. For other people, they need that. I think education and certifications offers that guidance a little bit and that confidence that I know this product versus, I dabble with it a little bit. I may not be the best guy for it versus, hey, I'm certified in this. I definitely know what I'm doing now, right? It's just a confidence booster a little bit more than anything else. And I think some guys like you don't need it. You're a businessman. You're smart. You know what you're doing. You know the network. You know to get with your people. You know to stay in contact. And you knew how to continue to succeed that way. And that worked for you. So there, in my opinion, in our industry, I can't speak for everyone. I don't think there's a right or wrong way. I think it's what you need to work for you to get up that ladder, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so good. Because once you pointed out, I was like, oh, okay, now that makes sense. Because they literally, the first show, they were like, hey, do you know how to do this? Yeah. I got there. I was like, man, I have no clue, man. There's nobody to ask. Like, we're going to figure this thing out.
But you figured it out, right?
Nowadays, right?
Well, that's another thing. So, man, 5 years ago, YouTube would not have been a resource. YouTube was like, hey, YouTube it's got stuff, right? Now, and I remember I started teaching classes on cameras, right? RCPs. Yeah. 10 years ago, there was nothing on that. I went to a class in like Pennsylvania, whatever, for Sony, like, I don't know, 10 years ago at Media Stage, and it was the greatest thing ever because there was nothing on it, and the manual just tells you what each button is. It's like, but doesn't describe what it does, right?
Right.
It's like what I tell people, right? Like if you want to do audio, you need to learn the difference between what a fader is and what it does. Because knowing when to do that fading and how much to do is totally different than just knowing a fader does my volume up and down. Yes, technically they all do that, but how to do that and at the right time so you don't miss the show, the cue is a totally different ballgame, right? That's experience versus knowledge, right? And again, that's what I'm saying. Experience versus knowledge is two different things that you need both at some point in our industry, at all times, but you need them both to get up, but you don't always need them at the same time. Is the frustration? It's like breakout room. I could do a general class for that. I don't need to get certified for that, but I could do a general class on it. And to people that are doing breakouts right now, just so you guys know, those are way harder than GSs. They're just chaos, right? Like, here's your gear. We sold this. Good luck. GS is like, here's your gear. Here's the schedule. Here's all the content. Sit there and don't miss your cue, right? It's a different ballgame. So if you guys that are doing breakout rooms right now, master that stuff. Because once you go to GS, you'll be like, I got this.
Yeah. All day.
all day.
All day, man. That's so good. What got you so I guess I see, because you were passionate personally about the education. And so is that what kind of led you into so let's do this. Tell me a little bit more about kind of Evolve and then AV Educate and how that fits into your story.
Yeah. So, we'll go back here a little bit. So I used to work for 7-8 years ago. I worked for a company called PSAV. I was the operations manager at the time, and I moved up in the industry, whatever. But I started doing classes monthly for the newsletter. And when I left that, I don't know, 5 years ago, when I left, I don't know, it was a long time ago. When I left, I was talking to, I remember this story. I was on a show for my buddy Tyreek in either Chicago or New York. Michael Hudson, who was a friend of mine, who I looked up to as a mentor at certain points because he knew more than I did. He asked me, he goes, "Hey, whatever happened to the training you're doing for PSAV?" I was like, "Oh, I just made some PowerPoints and some stuff out there." And I they're probably on my LinkedIn somewhere, to be honest. There's a, I think it's called SharePoint, what LinkedIn does, right? There's like a signal flow troubleshooting PowerPoint I made and a couple of things about Decimator that I made back in the day. And I just made this because the company asked for it. And I was like, "Yeah, cool, no problem, I'll make you something." And he goes, "Those are really good. I learned a lot from those." And I was like, "Oh, you learned from me? Okay." Like, "Oh, okay, all right. He was like, "You should still do that." And then I was like, "Oh, I'll think about it, Hudson." And then I did some other shows, and then Kathy Lou is a friend of mine out in South Florida. She was doing a lot of labor stuff, and she goes, "Hey, you're really good at the video stuff. I used to hire her a lot. Would you mind teaching some of the guys about some video stuff?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." So I did some stuff, and then on a napkin idea in Chicago with Mike Leitchen, I was like, "Man, what do you think about this idea I have here?" And I wrote it all down on a napkin, like, AV Educate, and we teach audio video lighting and create what was at the time was missing, right? This was 5 years ago. What was missing was a resource to learn things, because I felt like there was things available, but it was just kind of all spread out and chaotic. And he's like, "Dude, this would be great. You should totally do this." So I said, "Okay, cool." So I went online, did a Facebook thing, and created a group. And then Anthony Kessler, a good friend of mine who used to run, not Showmasters, used to run ATM and Crew Call, or Crew Call, then ATM. He was like, "Hey, I really like what you're doing here. I'd like to support you. I'm going to email my entire labor list to join your group." So it went from an idea to, "Oh man, I have 500 followers now. I got to do something," right? So then I started posting about all these resources and things. And the first 3 years, I gave credit to people that joined. Like, "Hey, thanks for joining. If you have any questions, let me know." We would do like monthly shares and stuff like that. And I would like to get back to that obviously at some point, but I would do like, "Hey, this month we're going to do everything about cameras, everything about this," and the community would be engaged and interact, and we'd post stuff and share it. And to this day, if you go to the Facebook page, the Facebook group, not the page, the group, and go to the files, there's over 150 downloadable PDFs, ebooks, of just content for audio, video, lighting. And then we also created, Jamie Jacobs came on board for a little bit. We created a subsection of learning paths. So you can learn like LED, camera, audio, EQ, and little things like that. You can learn in different spots of that. And then, I just kept doing it and building it, moving forward, and talking to guys like you, and talking to guys like Tyler Main from Evolve, and just things that, like, people were just like, "Hey, you should try to do this," or "Hey, you should do that," or blah, blah, blah. And like, AV Tech Talks for a while we did. That was started with Ed Wallach and Christopher Bodie Brown. We started that again in a separate group. We were having conversations just to help out the community at the time, because people were, I don't want to say suffering, but they were having mental anguish and things like that because of this situation, right? Like, they lost their careers and their livelihoods and their passion. Yeah. And we were doing like a support thing with the AV community. And then for some reason it became the Zoom calls became that, and the chats became technical. And we're like, "Hey, so there's guys that are craving this stuff." And so Ed and me and Scott Monroe came together, and we said, "Let's start this AV Tech Talks thing." And Ed and me kind of just created some content, ran with it, and we did 3 of them kind of closed doors, just a small group. And then we said, "Hey, do you guys want to do this live and see if it grows?" And it did. So it was a good call. And then again, started getting feedback from the community about what to do. And we said, "Okay, these are really great, but they don't fit the AV Tech Talks model, which is the kind of the hard skills, the nitty gritty of what you need to do as a technician. These are more like soft skills, kind of like the personal skills between you and the client, or you and your coworkers, or you and the end client, right?" So then Austin Jackson, we came together on that, and we said, "Hey, let's do a podcast for the soft skills," because that's what, Austin Jackson owns AJ Marks Productions, and it's a labor company. And he's like, "I don't need my guys to learn this because I have guys that are technical, but some of them lack in some of these softer skills." And I said, "Dude, that's great." So we started doing talks on the soft skills, right? Like how to socialize with people in public, how to work as a labor person and not poach clients, how to not step on toes, how to keep in your role, how to learn from people, right? How to approach that, not just, oh, this guy I worked with was an asshole. Like, well, maybe this was happening, that was happening. Just think about these things, how to treat clients, how to interact with clients, things that we got producers on there. We got promotional speakers on there to say, hey, like, when I'm on this side, these are things that I'm looking for. And it's like, well, if you guys didn't know that, one of the biggest complaints we got for a while was, and we addressed this with somebody who's a lead for a lot of these labor company, or a lead for the crew side. Mm-hmm. One of the jobs that they had was literally to check your cleanliness, like how the cables ran, how the tapes ran. Like that's part of their thing. And guys are like, oh, I always get complaints about it. And it's like, but that's part of what they're doing there. So now that you know that's part of the game. Get ahead of it. Do better, right? Get ahead of it, because it is part of it. Yes, not everyone's going to do the same thing, but if you do that, then you become the guy, oh, man, Omar taped down these cables really, really good. I like when he does this. Let's keep bringing that guy back. Versus, oh, man, this Joe Blow guy, he put these cables down, and, dude, they're just everywhere, and the tapes were horrible, and don't bring that guy back to my property. And it happens, right? And I've been on the side where I've had to say, hey, this guy was great. He stunk. Don't bring him back here. Yeah. Right? But we have those soft skill talks. So it's like AV Podcast was the soft skills, and AV Tech Talks was the hard skills.
Dude, that's so good, because you're making me like go through my history. I'm like, how did I learn this stuff? And I was like, I'm even trying to count. Like, I guess technically I've been in the industry like 8 years professionally. And I was like, I don't know, maybe I started at church is really where I got like the training. Like I got with a church that was growing, and they had the digital board and all that. And one of the guys there was in the tour live. And so he was teaching me like these things. And I was
there you go. You're your first mentor.
And I didn't know. Right. And now you're like saying it. And I'm like, oh, I didn't even know.
Let me put this question onto you then, right? So when you were in the church, though, did you have the freedom to mess up without the consequence of it being a failure to something? Was it more of a, hey, you messed up, here's how you do better? Yeah, that for sure. And I think churches offer that. They offer that unanimously, right? Because that's the environment, that's the culture you're in. And a lot of people that come from that and go to this, they have that comfortability to mess up because they've been taught that this isn't a failure, this is a lesson, and now I can learn from this and move forward. And I think when you have that, that's just, again, different mindset, right? So now when you came into this industry, you're like, well, I'm not going to lose everything if I fail. I'm going to learn, and I'm going to communicate properly, right? And you have the confidence again, and that's something we taught on soft skills, right? Having the confidence to tell your client, hey, I may not be the best person for that. I kind of know Dante, but I'm not the guy to do that, right? They'll say, you know what? I trust you, though, and because you're honest with me, I want you to do this. So do some research on it. I'll get you in the show ahead of time, and I'm going to give you a couple more hours to fine tune it because I trust you, right? Because now you're building trust, not just skill sets, but you're building trust with that person, and that's something they come from the church side. You already had that come in, right? I know that if I act this way, it's more beneficial to me than if I fake it till I make it. Let's say. Yeah. Dude, but tell me more. So the mentor you had, what were some of the things that you could think about just right now? I have a spotlight, right? Bing. Yeah. What are some of the things he taught you think that like just still to this day resonate?
Dude, relationships was the biggest one, man. And what it was because, of course, in the church, there's a band, right? And I guess what they were saying, one of the biggest things, there was always a split up in the industry was between the audio person or the techs and the band. There was this just huge gap. They didn't communicate well. And he said, dude, whatever you do, protect that relationship at all costs because they'll make it they'll make your job easier. Yep. And they did. And again, it was one of those things I didn't realize it. And as I went, like I would hear little things and people were like, hey, we actually like it. We prefer to work with you because the other audio guys, they're like, no, I don't want to change this. I don't want to do this. Oh, why are you asking me for something again? And I'm just like, I mean, oh yeah, do it. And you just keep it moving. And they were like, we can talk to you. And I was like, oh, I didn't get it. And, I joke, one of the guys I work with now, he hates it when I tell the story this way, but later on down the line, he told me, he was like, yeah, I love your attitude. And he's like, it never was that you were he was like, it was never that you were a great audio engineer from the beginning. I just liked being around you and I could deal with you being okay at the job. And I'm like, and so like now he tries to go, he's like, no, you were good. But like, you had a nice attitude. So if you were horrible, we would have kept you anyway. But
that's the thing. And that honestly, 100%, that's the thing we talk about too a lot on the podcast is people want to hire you. Like no one wants to go on tour with you. Like you could be the greatest, whatever, A1, L1, B1. But if you're just an asshole to be around, no one wants to be around you, right? Exactly. Like I may hire you for the super high end show because I know you're the best. But I'm going to keep you as far away from my client as possible because you're right. But if you're a good guy and I know you well, and I know you're going to do your best. I know you're trying your hardest, and you have the skill sets to do the job to 90% proficiency, but you're just good around people. I want to bring you around more because, one, I know I can rely on you to be there with my client. You're not going to frustrate them. And they may love you for how you act around them or whatever the case is, right? Which to me is more valuable than just your skill set. And I think people don't realize that sometimes. They get so stuck on, I have to be the best, I have to be the best. It's like, yes, you do, but you have to also be good to be around, because if you're not good to be around, no one wants to work with you. It's the reality of what it is. And audio guys seem to have this good balance. In video, and I thank myself on my hair. The older and bolder you get, the more grumpier you get. And I've tried very hard to stay positive and happy about my stuff. And there's times where I see it, right? Like I get so into the nitty gritty of the numbers and like the scenarios. And it's like, I know this is the problem. You're talking about the wrong thing. And I don't, it's like, oh, just go over there. But sometimes like, you know what? He's asking me the question because he wants to learn. That's what it is. He wants to learn. I need to be a little more patient and just say, hey, just follow my lead for a second. We're going to go through this way, and then I'll address all your questions, right? I think that's a little bit where it's different. But for you had the personal skills down locked. And I think that in our industry escalates you more because people want that. Because my client doesn't care if you know how to use that board. They care that you're not missing a cue and that when they're sitting next to you, you're not a pain in the ass and you don't smell bad. That's really what they care about, right? It's like, I know it sounds silly to say that. It's like, yes, you need to have skill sets and you need to be able to do some of your job, but it's the same token though my client who's paying us is sitting there with you, also wants to be able to just hang out and be like, hey, I'm having a good time here. You guys are doing your stuff. I'm doing my stuff. Everybody's getting paid. Yay.
Yeah. That's so good. And so one of the things I think, we had a sidebar conversation about this before and on kind of how we met on the education side of one of the things, because I heard one of the things you said was the thing of you're doing what you're paid to do there. And then, there's a guy asking you questions and you're like, of course, you're trying to remember like, okay, I was that guy at one point, but I got a job to do. Like we got to get here by 2. How do we kind of switch that in like what you're doing? Like, how do we get the education out there more on the front end and not on the job? Because like you said, most of the guys I know, they're learning on the job. They have, there's nowhere for them to turn to as far as they know. Right. So
that's a tough question. In my opinion, and again, this is my opinion, solely mine. I think there needs to be a change in how we see education as, sorry, I'm trying to think of the best answers. So there is the old mentality right now that's, I don't want to teach you anything because you're going to take my job away. Now it's been changing a little bit, thank God, to, hey, I want you to learn more because the next time we work together, I want you to be faster working with me, right? If it takes me 8 hours this time, it should take me 7 next time because you know more. Or I can trust you next time I see you to do this on your own. And that's changing a little, right? And then on the flip side to that, education needs to be something that drives you to there. It needs to be thought of as a ladder to increase not only your pay, but increase your accessibility. The other thing too that I don't say very often purposely is I think people miss the opportunities at the schooling, right? So if I go, for example, to an LED training class, I have now met X amount of other people that also do LED. If I get all those numbers and I send some information to some people, I am more likely to say, oh, you know what? Omar took that class with me. I can't do this gig. Let me pass it over to him. I just increased my ability to get work because now I've networked with those people. And other guys don't do that. They come in, they do the class, and they leave. They don't get anybody's information. And I always thought that was kind of weird, but it's that game we play, right? Like, well, you want to move up, sometimes you have to network. You can't be in a silo. Or you get the certification and you have the clients already built up for you. Then, again, there's tons of ways to do it. But if you're new to the industry, I think network is your biggest key. And getting a circle of friends that you guys can work together with. And then on the flip side to that, if you want to move up in the industry, right? Again, we'll talk corporate ladder here. The best way to do that is to train your replacement. So good. Go get the training you want to get the clients you want to get, and you say, you know what? Because the worst thing we could do is say no to our client. But if I get training to do E2 or Spider or Christie, and I have a client that does that, and that's what I want to do more of. I want to take more of their work. So I have to say yes to them more and not no to them because I took a lead role because that's what I'm used to being called for. But if I take that lead role and I start training somebody else to take that job, hey, I got a gig. Can you take this because I want to do this other job? Or in reverse to this, you never want to take a gig and then completely bail out because you can't do it. It's better for you and for your client if you can replace yourself. So again, hey, I could do that. Oh man, my client called me for the Spider gig. It's on the same time. No worries. Hey, listen, I got to do. I'm going to give you this other guy, though. He's just as good, I promise you. My client, they're a little frustrated and I'm not there for them. But obviously, my goal is to move up. But I'm also not leaving them hanging, so I don't burn my bridge with that relationship. Another thing too, I think that people need to remember, and some of this comes down to money, and I'm probably the worst at this because I just like, if I'm making money, I'm happy, right? Like I'm making money. I love what I do. I'm very passionate about this industry. I will take gigs that are not lead positions. I will take stagehand gigs once in a while for a couple of my friends that run labor companies. I'll be like, yeah, I'll do a stagehand work for a day. Yeah. Just pay me a little bit more than normal. But I'll do that. But again, it's to humble myself a little bit, right? Because I also forget what it's like to be in that position. And there's times where I do jobs and I meet people and I'm like, man, I forgot what it was like to be here. I forgot how crappy this truckload is at this property. Or, you know what? That guy's asking these questions. I was in the same boat one time. And being able to see that and remember it a little bit and to be in that position sometimes is just as good than just saying, oh, I remember I was there one time. Like, yeah, but really putting yourself back in that position to be able to say that. And the other thing too is like, I get to meet guys that way and meet people and talk to them a little bit and like, obviously, here's educational stuff, right? Like, here's a route to go, and that feels good because I once in a while get feedback from people I meet, and they're like, "Hey, man, I went here, I learned some stuff, and I took this course, and thank you so much. Like, it helped me so much in my career. 6 months, a year later, whatever." And I'm like, "Man, that's so good that I did something for myself to humble myself again because I was getting a little too arrogant or egotistical, and I met this guy, and he followed through on what I said, right? That's the other thing too, right? You have to follow through with that. Like, you can bring the horse to the water, you can't make him drink it." And when they do that and you hear back, you're like, oh man, I'm so proud of that. That's such a good thing for me to hear. And I wish I could share that more often, but if it's, well, I will say that if it's on social media, I usually share it. If it's a text message to me though, or a private message, it stays with me. But I think that's the key kind of triggers. They have to be willing to see that transition or see that point that they want to go to and do what it takes to get there sometimes. Sorry, I know that was complicated and kind of like a little bit spaced out.
No, that's so good because it kind of leads into like what I'm thinking of too is again, something we kind of sidebar about is what does it look like to get new people in the industry? Like, cause I'm wondering, I mean, I feel like the industry and I know we personally have dealt with it. I don't know, again, everybody does the general, everybody has this issue and it's like, but currently now I feel like there are not as many, techs in the industry, even labor, like all the labor companies are using the same exact people. So you go to them and they're like, oh no, they're all on a gig. And you realize because they're on your other gig. How do we get more people even interested,
So I think this needs to be a community effort. And I've tried to push for this and hopefully someone's watching will pick up on this. Ricardo out of, I don't even know where he's from, honestly, but Ricardo and me spoke a while ago and he started doing his own training. He started bringing in guys that were hands that he was getting directly by calling and said, hey, once a month at my property, I'm going to do a general AV class just to teach you guys. And he started getting results. And those guys that came in, he would put on more and more shows because they knew the basics. And then, but then like you said, right, then they get into the silo where it's, hey, I got my core group of guys, we're running it through. But I think if more people would open their doors a little bit and be less afraid of, well, I don't want to train them because I'm going to lose them. It's like, yes, but if you train them and they do leave you, you're not in a position where they're not going to come back to you for anything, right? If you treat them well and they work for you for a little bit and they move up, they're going to recommend you. And I'll give a prime example. I used to work for AFPC with Adam Faldetta. Our biggest clients were our techs, and people to this day don't believe us, but our audio guys, we took care of all the time. Hey, you want to change this out for this? No problem. We'll take care of it. It would cost money, right? I mean, it would cost the company money, but we own the gear. So whatever. They get what they want, but they were the ones that were bringing us the clients because they're like, hey, Adam gets me what I need, right? AFPC gets me the gear that I want to do the show with, not what they give me because that's what they want to give me, right? So we took care of our guys, and in turn, they took care of us. And I think that's across the board, right? So you got a stagehand now you take care of. A couple years later, he moves on. Great. A couple years after that, he moves into a bigger position. Who's he going to call for a resource? The ones who helped him start, right? They're going to call the AAPCs. They're going to call the Ricardos. They're going to call the Kevins. They're going to call the Omars. They're going to call the Chris's and be like, hey, you helped me out. I'm in a position where I can help you out now. Please help me out. A good friend of mine, Geronimo Tarif, does a lot of training. There's a lot of hands-on. There's a lot of just kind of giving out. He actually sponsored the AV podcast, and he, sponsored by paying for the program and everything. He was one of the reasons that I was able to do some of this stuff, and he taught me a lot in the industry and put me in positions where, hey, you could be doing the EIC work. You could be doing the producer, the technical director. Like, oh, cool. Like, never really been my thing, but I'll try it out. And he's like, here's what you need to know. Here's what you got to do. Boom. And then do a show. Hey, I heard all this, everything was good. Work on X, Y, Z, right? And now when I have an opportunity to give something back to him, a show, whatever it is, hey, here you go. Cool. And again, he still reciprocates. Hey, here's some commission. Do you want to be on the show? How can I help you out? I'm always thinking of him because he helped me out when I needed it. Why not when I have the opportunity to give it back? And I think we and again, that's not going to be everybody, right? That's going to be majority of who you meet, though. but that is the actual scenario that happens versus the opposite, where it's like, well, I told them all this stuff, they took all my clients and they went away. Maybe something happened on your end where you just started to do not as good, right? Like it's always it's a two-sided streak, right? Like maybe you started doing less stuff, or your gear was getting outdated and you weren't updating it, or you weren't giving the results that your clients were expecting anymore, and he was staying up to speed on things. And that does happen. And, those are different conversations. But I think if more companies and more labor companies, which, for example, ATM pays AV Educate a fee for training, for general AV training. Yeah. We do about once a quarter, twice a quarter, depending on the season, we do a class. They're paying out of pocket to train their guys, right? So they're investing in their crews. I think if more people did that, like the Lassos, the Showmasters, the crew calls, the other labor companies, I'm sure there's a ton I can't think of right now. Yeah, right. If they did those things, right? They and by the way, if you guys are listening from these companies, I'm sorry, but other companies do those things. If they wanted to invest in that, and I'm sure they do it in some other fashion, just not with me, which is why I'm jealous. If they do it in some other fashion, that's good. But those guys they're gonna move up. They're gonna be in positions to give back, and they're gonna call who they know. They're gonna call the company they know, and it's not an immediate return. It's not an immediate like I see return on investment tomorrow. No, it's gonna be a couple years down the road when they say, oh, I remember you did good to me. I'm doing good to you.
Yeah, but that's so good, man, because for me, man, I feel like, we're young enough that we're thinking, business wise, not saying we want to be pushing boxes, but like business wise, man, we got 30, 40, 50 years if we really on the business side. And so it goes, the more people I train, the more shows I can do. And I'm with you all the way.
And it comes down to that because at some point, right, I can only do so much on selling and so much on marketing. If the best way to get your name out there is word of mouth. We all agree to that. Like the best way is word of mouth. Yeah, marketing helps. Yes, this stuff helps, but we're bombarded by it all day long. And honestly, I'm at the point now, 12 years in the industry, 13 years in the industry. I'm at the point where like, if I see a labor call or something like this and I'm like, well, who's the company? When did they pay? When did they do this? Like there's a little more questions in my head versus when I was younger, I was like, sign me up, where I got to go, where I got to be, right? I got to get the money. But as you get older and you start to learn these things, I think hopefully as a business mindset person, right? These guys are transitioning to that mindset where I have clients that I want to keep, right? Because, and you know as well as I do, right? At a certain point, you're going to have 12 clients, then 8, then 6, then 5, maybe 3 that really keep you busy for the whole year. And you're going to cater to them as much as you can because they treat you well, they pay on time, whatever the case is, you're going to shrink that circle down because you have your core bread and butter, right? And you want them to succeed. And what's going to happen is you're going to get at some point good enough in your career, well enough educated, well enough versed, well enough in the industry that people start coming to say, hey, I have a show idea I want to do. Can you help me out? Let me call Media Stage to get some of the gear and partner with them because they've always taken care of me. Sure. And then it's a little gig that you end up making your commission on. And then now you have these little things. And then if you do it well, play your cards right and do right to the client, then you say, hey, you know what? Let's do a contract for 5 years, right? And now we have the same consistency going on. And now somebody who worked for this paid you is now also your client, right? And it's just a win-win situation. And this happens. And I'm sure you've seen it. I see it. With the guys that we work with, the higher end guys that I was trained for, I am now working for because they are doing their own shows with their own people and they're using gear from companies that I worked for. And they're calling me like, hey, you were good at what you did. I like you pretty much. Oh, dude, yeah. If you trust me enough, I'd love to be there and help out. Right. Yeah. Oh, you're using who? Oh, dude, I'll call Media Stage right now. What's up, man? I got some gear from them. Cool, man. That's awesome. Right. You start building these connections because you've fostered them. And that's what happens to all of us. And that, we start off with the labor companies. Well, most of us start with the labor companies. Then we get the clients directly. And then we start becoming the end clients and doing that stuff. And I'm not saying that happens for everybody and that's how it runs out. But at some form or fashion, right, we need to go from here to here to here. Yeah.
That's so good, man. Man, I could talk about this all day, man. Let me. So this is the part. You're like, look, I was like, man, we got to do like a part 2, part 3, get into this, man. So this is part of the podcast where we jump into. We call it the rapid fire section.
Oh
we're going to change the name because it never ends up being rapid fire ever. It's like we end up asking and
lightning
it's like a deep answer, right? Lightning or something, right? All right, cool. So first one, coffee or tea?
Ooh, tea.
Tea, nice. Tea. Your favorite mobile phone app right now?
My favorite mobile phone app would. Oh man, that's a difficult one. I don't know. I'm not a big TV guy. I'm not a big Netflix or you know what? Crunchyroll. Right now, I've been digging into Crunchyroll a little bit for the last 3 months. Me and my daughter have been watching a lot of Crunchyroll.
Nice. What's one question that you wish people would ask you, or like they don't know enough about you to ask?
Oh, I don't know. I'm I'm open today because you're asking me questions, but usually I'm very, very not about that. What's one question people would ask me? About my partner, my significant other. She's amazing. She has her own company. She does a lot of things. She's an event planner. No one asks about her. So if you guys want to ask about her, let me know. I got tons to say.
Nice. That's a good one, man. All right. So of course, besides the Event Collab podcast, what's your like favorite podcast or, favorite ebook or blog or something that you go to all the time?
This is where it's going to go downhill for me. I actually don't listen to podcasts. Yeah. I'm very bad at that. I'm very bad at consuming content. I'm more about making it, pushing it out there.
That's funny.
The recent book I'm reading right now, I try to read a book I used to be much better at this a couple years ago. Now I'm not as good, but the current book I'm reading is called How to Listen. This book's very cool. Yeah. I usually read a lot of manuals and technical stuff, and a lot of the books that I've read, I've kind of gotten to, like, I think I have 34 books total. I have a whole Excel sheet of books that I could tell people about, but I've got a bunch of books. I've read them all. There's one coming out from Tim K right now, Tim Kashal, who's coming out with a book about video I want to read on. But the current one I'm reading is called How to Listen. And it's to teach me to be quiet more and listen to people and speak to them in a better way. And the book's it's got some good pieces in it so far that I've been like, oh, that's a good way to think about things.
That's so good, man. What is your favorite city to work in?
Favorite city to work in would be Miami. It's my hometown.
Nice. That's my favorite city as well.
Yeah.
I've only gotten to go like once. So
coffee's good. A colada. If it's not a colada, it's not coffee. Right. That's why I like tea. Because if it's not a colada, it's not doing shit. And the food is really good. I mean, honestly, love Orlando, love New York, love California, love Texas. Well, I love Texas for me. But Miami's always got good food. I can get Latin food. I can get Colombian food. I can get Hawaiian. I can get Indian. It's all good.
Everything.
Yep.
Man, you know what got me in Miami, man? The guys hand-rolling cigars on the,
hand-rolling cigars, on the strip. Yeah.
I'm like, oh, this is amazing.
For that, yep.
Nice. Where do you see the event industry in 3 years?
That's a future prediction here. So 3 years, I see the industry. I don't know, man. It's a good question. We are changing a lot of things right now. How deep can I go into this? How much time do I have for lightning round?
Good, man. You're good, man.
Yeah. So there's a couple things that happened that I think haven't really taken effect yet, right? So Live Events Coalition came out during the pandemic, got 500,000 followers, did very, very well. They pushed a lot of the things that have offered us opportunities to get money like the PPE program. They're part of that initial push. Another one that just came out for the theaters that didn't open up or whatever. There's a fund that came out of that. Also for the music industry, that was part of their push as well. That was directly with them as well. So very, very cool with that. There are legal things that are going to start changing now. We went from being kind of like the backstage ninjas to now we're in the public eye. And now people are taking notice of us. Not only of us, the business and how much it makes.
Yeah.
And Big Brother wants part of that piece, right? So get ready for those changes happening. Some stuff has happened already that's been beneficial for us. Some of the food stuff came back this year, so now we get a bigger percentage off of food. But some of the business stuff is being looked at a little bit differently now. Some of the way we tax ourselves, some of the ways we're getting our taxes done, especially because of what happened in the last 3 years with the pandemic. Our taxes and how we do the returns are getting looked at now, right? It's a little bit more under scrutiny because now they know that we exist. They know what this industry is. It's not just a hobby. It's an actual business.
Right.
So we're getting looked at a little more. And then the third thing that's happened big time that hasn't really, I think, affected anybody is Blackstone, I think it is, which is Goldman Sachs, bought out a huge sector of the market, right? Encore, VER, which is also something else, I forget the name right now. But they bought out a big sector of the market, and they're known to buy out a bunch of things and then control that market. And we haven't seen it too much yet, but I think that and the position Encore's in where they are controlling the market as far as rates go is going to somewhat trickle down. Obviously, it's been beneficial for us right now because it's like, hey, they're charging X amount because of the 50% they got to give back to hotels, so we can always beat those prices. But the labor side is where it's going to start changing a little bit. Like, oh, why pay these guys this much? Why am I paying you so much, right? And it's like, well, because we're technicians and engineers who have this skill set, and they supposedly don't. But there are guys who are going over to that side because I need a full-time job. I need to be with my family. I enjoy where I'm at, right? I think those three things moving forward in the next 3 to 5 years, let's say, are going to start showing some effect with that. And then especially now that Encore is just kind of like the global powerhouse, right, with VER as far as rentals goes. There's been this chaos happening, but at some point they will get together, or not get together, but they will have a better formula in place to be productive at what they do.
Yeah.
And it will be something to be reckoned with. So right now it's being chaotic and they're doing a lot of different things and the systems aren't accurate and everything's being redone and rechecked. But when they get it all together and working right and they get it oiled out again, they're going to be something to reckon with. And I think in a couple of years that's going to become an issue. And thinking about personal side of our lives, what's going on in the world in general with everything going on outside the world, I won't get specifics there. But that will also have a trickle-down effect to us as well. And I think that's when things are going to really start changing and really start to push. To give retrospect to that, during the pandemic, a lot of the software that we use got updated dramatically, right? We're going to see another opportunity for that to happen on the business side. I think that's going to affect our side as well, because the difference now will be that where we are the people that support all these causes, right? We're like, oh no, AIDS epidemic, do a show about it, right? Raise some money, right? It was like, oh no, COVID epidemic. Well, don't do anything about it because you can't gather, right? We're in the business of mass gatherings, right? That's a different scenario. But I think now moving forward, when there are these scenarios, we're going to get busy, but it's going to be a very select few and a very like strike force type of mentality where it's like we are starting to see the automation come into play now. And now with the Synth 2020 in play and everything going on over there, a lot of the companies, especially the big two houses I talked about, Blackstone and Encore, they're drilling in on the like one-man bands. Yeah. And you're going to start seeing, well, they did it like this. Why can't you guys do it with just one person? It's like, because that's how failures happen. And we don't want to do it that way, right?
Right.
But clients don't get that. They just see, well, this one guy did playback, graphics, switching. He did all this stuff, right? Yeah. So our crews are going to have to get a little more experience on how to optimize themselves and be more of a one-man proficiency and kind of multitask on a different level than they're used to. Yeah. And some of them are already doing it. And I'm sure some of you guys are like, I do it all the time. Yeah. Good for you, and you're in a good place. The ones that are playing catch-up, they are like, oh man, this is a lot. Stream decks are being used a lot more. So that's a big thing happening right now. That's going to continue to trickle and continue to seep into what we do. And there's a lot of manufacturers that are coming out that are ingraining that into their programming, and it's part of what it is. Yeah. So that's starting to happen a lot more. So I think all those little factors coming together is going to cause a little bit of a shift in the next 5 years in how we're used to seeing things from the past to what it is now. So what we're used to 3 years ago will never be that anymore. I think we're still there now because we see the value in it, and it's like we need to do now. And unfortunately, we're so good at solving these for our clients. It's kind of back shooting back at us. Yeah. But moving forward, I think that's going to start causing an issue down the road as far as the level of skills you need, the level of personality you need to be in a room with somebody, and the level of economics you are able to get because of it.
Yeah. Man, that's so good. You're giving me homework, man, because I'm like, man, I ain't even hear about that. Let me go check this out after that. No, it's all good, man. What's the best piece of advice you were ever given?
If something isn't there, create it yourself.
Ooh, that's good. That's so good. Last, what does collaboration mean to you?
Collaboration means coming together and doing something that you are, I don't want to say passionate about, but doing something that you're wholeheartedly behind, right? Mm-hmm. Collabing with more people that don't think the way you think, that aren't the same as you, that aren't, the plethora of reasons I could say, but coming together with people that think differently but have the same end goal and making that work, right? Sometimes it's better to complete something that didn't be perfect, and having those differences of opinions, I think, create a better end result if you can not fight, but if you can get through them, right? The end result is much greater than the individual.
Yeah, that's so good, man. Tell the people, where can they connect with you at, man? Where do you want them to go and find you and talk with you and keep the conversation? Yeah,
if you guys find me on Facebook, I'm under AV Educate. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Or look up Omar Colom, or send me an email at omar@evolvetechnology.live. You can reach me out there as well for training or just a chit-chat or be on another show or talk to me personally and just have a conversation. I love doing these talks. Chris, obviously, we've talked in the past, and we always were brainstorming just random things. So, I'm a very curious person. I have a very good, I don't want to say intellect, but insight into a lot of things that I like to just talk to people about. And I think that is the way to excel in what you learn, is to talk to people and to really troubleshoot it and get hands-on and just, be open to talking to all kinds of walks of life with different views and perspectives, because it opens up those doorways to different ways of thinking.
Absolutely, man. That was so good, man. We gotta go ahead and schedule a part 2 to make sure it falls in the middle.
Let me know, man. Yeah, we could deep dive more into any of these topics and bring anybody else on who wants to come on with us. I mean, these are fun, and obviously, like I keep saying, anybody else who wants to come on with these, obviously, Chris, this is your show. I don't want to take over, but anybody who wants to come on, they should come on and talk, because they'll bring in that extra perspective that may click for somebody else better than what I'm saying or than what you're saying or anybody else. And that's what it's all about, is opening that moment where you're like, oh, that's what I needed to hear. Okay, this makes sense now.
Yeah, I think they'll definitely get a lot of that from here, man. Omar, thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me.
And let's, man, you guys check out the next episode, and we'll catch you later.
Woo woo. See you guys later.